of what's in the packets that they've received for the hearing and any kind of just major points of interest. We don't have applicant participation in this meeting. It is really just a debriefing. There's no public comment. There's nothing like that. And then this video is streamed on YouTube so that other folks can watch it and get caught up as well. But it's a public meeting in terms of being open and viewable online, but it's not a public discussion like we'll have on Monday. So just any questions on that?
I think we're all good. Thank you.
Hi, Isabella. Hi, Betty. And hi, Lynn.
And while we don't need a quorum for this meeting, because it is just kind of an information session, we're going to give it a couple minutes to see if any of our other commissioner members log on before getting started. So we'll just give it a couple.
Okay, so we're missing Barbara and Joan.
Joan and Ben.
Oh yeah, Ben.
I did hear from April.
Yeah, I just saw the email just now. Okay, that's better.
Hello.
Hey, Joan.
Hi, thanks. Hey.
Just.
Hey, Joan.
Hey there.
Waiting a couple minutes to see if anybody jumped on, if Barb was attending. I can't recall, and I was just looking through my emails. So she may very well have notified me at some point if she was not going to be here, but I may very well have forgotten as well. So I was going to give her a couple more minutes. April did notify us that she would not be here.
Yep. So we're not expecting April. We don't usually see Ben, correct?
Correct. So if we want to get started, Joan, as the vice chair, if you want to grab the bull by the horns.
We can.
Yeah, she said that she won't be coming. She's driving.
Okay.
Yep, we can.
She may have notified me.
Call the meeting to order, and I was more worried about clients than I was about the agenda for the meeting. So I don't even have the agenda in front of me because it didn't occur to me that Barbara wouldn't be there. So go ahead, Gabrielle, take it away.
Yeah, I'm happy to get us rolling. All right. So the first thing we do have on our agenda for October 9th is, whoops, where did I put my agenda? It's on too many screens. The first thing we have is architecturals for Sycamore Ridge, and those were discussed last month at the workshop. So we just saw them a couple weeks ago, really. They have the one modification, and that is for those small windows. But otherwise, nothing has been updated in your packet, and the material is the same as you saw at the workshop. And Sherry is on leave today, so I'm covering her items.
All right.
I see Cherian logged on. Did you say Cherian?
Oh,
No,
as Sherry.
Sherry.
Oh, got it. Sorry.
So do we have any questions from either Ron or Dorothy?
Nope.
No, thank you.
Nope.
Nope.
All right. I don't have any questions. Is there anything else we need?
Not on that item.
All right.
So that's on our miscellaneous, and we'll move on to the new business items. And then we have a 704 and 706 Trail Avenue, the final plat.
Yes, and that was mine. That's another simple 1 lot into 2 lots. And for that one, at the workshop, the commission had asked for certification that the party wall
Monica,
was fire.
do you have your camera on, or you on a?
I do have my camera on. Oh, I know what I did.
It's not showing
I
up. I want people
There
to be
we are.
able to see you. Especially
Yes,
since it
sorry.
looks like we may have somebody who are going to be trying to read lips perhaps when they see this.
Thank you for letting me know. I forgot I flipped that little camera thing so that.
Great. Okay, great. Thank
Right.
you.
Thank you, Joan. Yeah, so that was 1 lot into 2 lots. And for that one, the commission had asked for certification that the party wall was fire safe. And so when in your packets, it says that that's still outstanding. And right now it's listed as a condition of approval. But Dustin Nussbaum, our building department, got together with our fire engineer and they've made a determination that the wall is fine. They're not worried about it. It's been standing as a party wall since the 60s, and they don't think there's any further review. So I'll update the conditions of approval for Monday night.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Either of the commissioners have questions?
No,
Nope.
thank you.
Yeah.
Seeing no head shaking, is there anything else that you need to add?
No, ma'am, that's it. It's a
right.
pretty straightforward case.
We will see you Monday.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And next, Gabrielle, is the School for the Deaf Community Center?
Next is actually the 550 Highland project, the
Right.
revision to the final site plan. So that was one of Sherry's applications. She'll be around on Monday. That application has the modification for parking so that they can use some of the larger trailer spaces to count towards their minimum vehicular parking tally. So that is a separate action that will have to be taken. We did have a couple of cleanup comments. My staff report there. There were some conditions related to moving the the loading space behind building C. It's encroaching into the drive aisle behind that. There was also some encroachment of the access point on the adjoining property's frontage. So they need to either execute an easement so that they can construct that part of the driveway apron over the adjoining property, or move the apron so it's totally on their property. There's also some sidewalk reconfiguration, and we have an exhibit referencing that they need to do. So they're mostly just administrative. Those are only kind of the site design adjustments that need to be made. The other conditions are just notes and getting their confirmation from the FAA and MAA that the buildings don't pose traffic hazards to air traffic. There we go.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any questions from commissioners?
No, thank you.
I do, just real quickly. So Gabrielle, so you're calling these other things, like the loading space, the access drive, it says it's a third access drive. It's not, is that correct? Like, so is that a new access drive compared to what it was before?
There is a new access drive that is proposed with this revision. It was on the plan at the workshop, but it's new to this revised plan.
Okay.
So not new since you saw it last, but new as part of this application.
Okay, so the third access, the sidewalk, the hold on, the loading space, and shifting the access to either do an access easement. What are these? So these are all considered administrative, and so these things were alone without the buildings and building increases and the third building being built. it would not even come to us. Is that correct? I'm trying to make sure I understand.
So there are thresholds that we can review at staff level revisions from previous site plans. The building, the scale of the changes with the building are what's triggering this coming back to the Planning Commission, them adding additional square footage, adding that separate building. The conditions are basically little cleanup notations that by themselves, if they had just been the need for the revision, yes, that would have been administrative, but the plan itself is being triggered because of those larger updates.
Okay. And that's what I wanted to know, because I was wondering why they weren't part of the actions, but they wouldn't need to be because they're minor and more administrative.
Correct. Those don't warrant separate actions to be taken, but just in approving the plan, the Planning Commission's approval is contingent upon those things being adjusted. So you're recognizing that those conditions those changes have to be made, but they don't warrant their own actions.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mhm. Good question.
So Gabrielle, I had one question. I thought wrong that they'd already had their airport approvals when they at the last time we saw this before they made the changes. So why do they have to go through that again?
Anytime anything's changed with the building heights or building locations, they would get new FAA approval.
okay.
So they're looking at any potential obstructions that would impact the airspace. So even like if somebody moved light poles, we would probably ask them to get reconfirmation, things of that nature, especially in such close proximity to the airport.
So even though the height didn't change and sort of the general footprint didn't change because the buildings themselves changed, and it has to be reapproved. Okay.
Well,
Great,
plus they added a building, right?
Right.
Yeah, but they kind of added it within the footprint of the way that it was before. They just changed.
The new building has changed the location of where there was building before. And when you think about grading of sites and things, it's good to ensure that when you're making those kind of site adjustments that you're also keeping, being mindful of the fact that the building in one location over here versus the building in a location over here may have that, different impacts. So.
Okay. Great, thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, I do have one question now that I think about it. So Gabrielle, I noticed that there needed to be a slight update to the traffic information about the trips and so forth. And it stated it was because of the changing of the square footage of the building and then adding a building. I was curious as to, so adding an access point wouldn't trigger the requirement for that information as well? It was just the buildings themselves, and then adding another building. So I was just curious about that as well.
I'll let Sharon chime in if he wants to. The square footage is what's generated. The square footage and the use is what's generating the impacts that we measure in the traffic impact studies. The degree to which these access points would change that is probably pretty limited. Sharon, I'll let you speak to it, how that all gets figured in.
Okay. Hi, Sharon.
Hello. Yeah, I think I'll treat it as two separate issues. I mean, the site access is a function of operation. So I think to the extent considering the street classification, et cetera, if an additional access would permit for better street operations or site operations, that's something that would look positively. I mean, we're not necessarily looking at access breaks everywhere, but in this case, it kind of justified. So trying to balance the use with the access break. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question fully, but yeah, okay. The trip generation and the access are totally different.
Okay, so
one informs the other. Sorry.
Okay, so are you saying that adding an access point could, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Adding an access point could trigger a request for additional traffic information or updated traffic information. I understand the square footage and its uses and all of that and the additional building, because that's what was in the staff report, so it makes sense. I was just more curious about the access point, like why, as it lists all the other things, why that wasn't included in it as well. That was the piece that I was just trying to understand, because they're adding an access point with this revision, I should say. It doesn't matter. I mean, I don't know. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this case, what you want to see, the change is really that new building they're adding, which is not really considered as a commercial warehouse type use. So it totally makes sense to have potentially an access that serves that that use, which would be non-commercial traffic. So I think kind of having the separation is a good thing. Okay. And being a local road, or I recollect, I forget exactly the access, as long as it meets the separation distances, is something that we wouldn't think of negatively. Yeah. So.
Okay, I was just curious. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Is there any other questions or anything else on this item?
Nope.
Sounds good. The next item is.
Now we are on to the Maryland Deaf Community Center. And this is, we have the site plan, and then we have the forest conservation plan as well.
Sharon, this is yours?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, since we were at workshop, the applicant tried many things to see how they could best enhance the landscaping along the frontage improvements that we can only expect, but that are not yet designed. So there was a challenge to that. They did come up with some really good ideas, and of course those are not part of our review because they're going to be asking for a deferral, but we wanted to see, and we wanted to see what could be done. It's not going to be a dedication because it's too tiny. So outside of this review, the applicant may proceed to a hearing with the Marion board to see if there's a dedication. It may just be though that the applicant decides to maintain that frontage, but it looked good. We did not include any drawings on it. The staff has seen it, and we do know that the applicant has done a great deal of work on it. Other than that, there was no drastic change between the workshop site plan. They made the corrections that were shown at the workshop in the landscape exhibit. Those are actually now the landscape plan proper in the site plan. There are a couple of conditions that they will address based upon serious discussions with the stormwater. Stormwater in that, just to remind you, that whole area of the city has some significant stormwater issues and concerns. A big system that drains from all points to the north and east. Well, not all points, but a lot of points to the north and east to this property, to the stormwater facility at the rear of this property, and then flow down south toward Carroll Creek. So it was very important to get those conditions properly in place and to still maintain the perimeter landscape buffer as much as possible. So one of the conditions, however, is that they have to move some of the trees that they considered planting just a little bit further to make sure they're outside of the stormwater facility itself. And a couple of notes that I wanted them to put just to make sure that they were in there, the standard notes. But aside from that, there was nothing, no deal breakers. We worked until basically the 11th hour, making sure that the stormwater development plan was approved, and it was. That was a big deal. So I'm not kidding you. It was literally on Monday when we got the approval, and that was just a very big deal.
Great. Questions from the commissioners?
I have one.
Go ahead, Ron.
So there was absolutely no consideration during this time to moving the building closer to the street that I think was a substantial part of the discussion last time.
Yeah, no, there was a great deal of work, Commissioner Beatty, a great deal of consideration and attempts to see if they could do it and still maintain the safety of the attendees to the community center. Again, this is not a community center for the general public. This is for the deaf, and the deaf might also be blind. The deaf may also be old. They may also be in wheelchairs. So the considerations for handicapped or ADA spaces is more than just the two that are smack dab up against the building in the front. They had to also take into consideration the fact that people cannot hear oncoming vehicles or sometimes even see them. And so you can't have vehicles going around and about and sometimes in more creative fashion. So we did look at the safety standards they had to comply with for this grant, and they were serious considerations. So it's a classic conflict between that a lot of development has to deal with when it comes to factoring in ADA issues in the design as one of the major design things they have to solve for. In this case, they tried to solve as much as possible for landscape. They tried to solve as much as possible for diminishing the amount of parking on site. But they also, unlike other developments, had to also solve for the safety issues unique to the deaf community.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we considered all of that, and the rather spectacular approach that they will do to improve the frontage, which includes a kiosk, keeping that transit kiosk, which is an important item, by the way, for the entire community. It will be the only kiosk right now between that site and East Patrick Street.
That though is not an improvement the applicant's constructed.
No, but the applicant did coordinate with Transit to do that. Transit was contacted and requested to provide one, and of course wanted to do it. But we don't want to have to move that kiosk or move plants once they're in place. So there's a lot of what if and futuristic considerations that had to be done to see whether or not they could do what they could do as soon as possible and not have to uproot anything and still have a really nice space. Now, that said, it's not smack up against the street, the sidewalk, as it might be further south. But it will be a lovely addition to the community, in my opinion.
We could definitely, I think, that conversation for the applicant to respond to on Monday night, their considerations is definitely the line of questioning you'd want to pursue at that time.
Right.
Commissioner Manelis?
Yeah. So I had a couple of, well, maybe one or two or three questions. One was, and I guess I must have missed that discussion, but what is a pocket park? Like, what is that?
We don't actually have we don't have those.
Okay, what are
it was something that in planning is something that our private sector developers often put in subdivisions, little green areas, little areas for play sometimes or for passive recreation, much smaller than the city accepts as a park dedication. It's not parkland, so the city doesn't take it and maintain it. So it's nested, it's like a pocket, just a little pocket park. Okay. However, those can be some of the sweetest spaces if done properly.
Okay. So I did have I have two more questions. So one is about, I think on page 2, that speaks to the East Street Corridor Small Area Plan, which I call SCAP for short. What struck me was the language that I was reading, and I was kind of taken back as I was wondering if I had seen it in that way before. I think I was on the Planning Commission starting in 2019, and I don't ever recall the SCAP being connected to the form-based code. So it says here, the SCAP is anticipated to be implemented through a form-based code that is currently in drafts, et cetera, et cetera. even though it was adopted in 2017. And so I'm just trying to understand that because, back in 2019, when we mentioned and talked about the SCAP, it was a guiding document for that area and used, I believe, along with the LMC. So now what are we saying in terms of this when I'm reading this? Are we saying that it's just the LMC that prevails in this particular project and that the SCAP is mute or no longer valid unless?
No, thank you so much for that. And Gabrielle, after I'm done, if I screw up too badly, please jump in.
Okay.
I will enthusiastically yield. I am delighted for that question because in order to really wrap our heads around what these plans are and how they work, they don't contradict. So let's start with the SCAP. It was adopted in 2017. The public worked on it. Part of that plan said it was going to be implemented through a form-based code. That's true.
It did say it was going to be implemented through an overlay. I think originally was it anticipated. So there are a lot of regulatory tools that you can implement vision documents like the East Street Small Area Plan. Right. The East Street Small Area Plan originally envisioned some sort of overlay tool, like we have a Carroll Creek overlay, those sorts of things. The form-based code is the iteration that it has taken. So the form-based code is aimed to be
you can hear me, but everybody froze. It says, hold on. All right, we're all back.
Yeah, I was just saying that the original East Street Corridor Plan anticipated possibly being implemented through an overlay zone type of application, like the Carroll Creek overlay or something of that nature. And that was in 2017. Form-based codes have become kind of trendy. And I think that those now offer a design solution that is representative of the visions that were established in the East Street Small Area Plan. So the regulatory tool that is being evaluated to implement the East Street Corridor Plan is the form-based code.
No, I'd like to jump in just a second again, make sure that we are all on the same page on the what's parallel. The EastCap has been, or how do you say that properly again? SCAP?
I call it SCAP.
SCAP has actually, it's a policy. It's like it's similar to our comprehensive plan for the city. It's a policy document. Okay, valuable. It was adopted in 2017. The policies in there were absorbed by and included in the comprehensive plan. So a lot of the changes that went into the land management code to implement our comprehensive plan included guidelines that also apply to SCAP and to other small areas. And you know how you're familiar with that planning cycle. The comprehensive plan not only has new initiatives, but includes a roll-up, what they call a roll-up of plans that were adopted prior to it. And it becomes then the larger comprehensive document. And then its implementing tool is our code, our policies were rolled up to the extent it could. Our land management code is the implementing tool for the city. So the form-based code, and Gabrielle's right, it won't be instead of the land management code. It will be more of just a small area tool that's used with the overlay in this area. It should not contradict everything. It should make it better. But again, those are tools that are being developed now.
Okay.
And so right now we use the tool that's adopted and formal, the legal document we follow. The SCAP has been rolled up into the 2020 comprehensive plan. You can still take a look at it. It hasn't been undone. It's been incorporated, rolled up. But the adopted code that we follow right now is the land management code that we have.
Okay.
Now, on the other hand, I last year at the Planning Commissioners Conference, I talked about the challenge that planning commissioners face during the lag between the time when you've had a whole lot of community involvement and new ideas, and you're not really at the adoption process. You haven't adopted the new plan, but everybody's excited about it. So it's one of the most challenging times to be a planning commissioner because your feet have to be firmly anchored. And this is my advice, and to you as somebody who's been a commissioner herself, I know how tough it is. Your feet have to be firmly rooted in the law, in the code that you have to implement. But with that being said, my heart goes out to you. I know the challenge. I do understand the challenge totally. So we can work and urge our applicants to do as best they can to go where we think we want to see everything happen, but they you know, it is what it is.
Okay. And the form-based codes, where are they? Is that a standstill? Where is that? What's the status
Gabrielle?
on that?
I'm throwing the hard ball back to you.
Sure. That is still being reviewed administratively. There's a draft on the city's webpage, if you haven't checked it out, but it has not been really thoroughly vetted through the administrative functions of the legal department or the engineering department or any of the operational crews who need to weigh in on it. So it is in that process. It needs to be reviewed and vetted for operations and feasibility and all of those good things.
Okay,
Legality.
Just want to hone in a little bit more. So is it at a standstill, or like where specifically is it? I know that you said it's in the administrative process and everybody the different departments have to weigh in. I know I've seen the draft online, but I'm just curious as to where exactly is it in the process? If you don't know, that's, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think other departments have received copies of it. As to where it is in their review, I could not address that. It's just one of the many priorities that a lot of different staff are working on. So it's at that stage currently.
Okay. And there's just one last thing, I was looking at page 5, it talked about the GC zone. And then I guess I didn't even think about that. So the general commercial zones don't have an urban design standard. So you really can't, say it has to be up to the street, or it has to be like the residential developments have maybe, well, at least some, when I have design standards that need to be met, and it wouldn't apply to a general commercial build.
The project is not in a master plan. It's not in a MU master plan or a, PND. Those are subject to the urban design standards, as are like the Carroll Creek overlay, but there are no urban design standards for general commercial development.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a couple questions. First of all, Sharon, you had mentioned at some point there was safety standards, a document of safety standards that the community center needed to meet.
I only heard the I'm aware generally of that. I haven't seen their specs, but I'm aware from just working with ADA plans in my other past lives that the various communities can have different considerations. If you can't see or hear traffic and you have small children or the very old, it becomes, just try to cross any street with your eyes blindfolded and your ears plugged up. I'll tell you something, it is a nightmare. So the goal is to minimize through traffic.
So if there's something, if you could let the applicant know that if there's something regarding safety standards that they can share with us for Monday, that would be very helpful. If we have a better understanding of what they're trying to comply with that's, unique, that would help us to make this decision better. And then my other question, I know that they're asking for a deferral for the road front improvements. But when those improvements are eventually done, are they not going to be done according to the site plan? I guess one of my question is,
well,
they will
be
all of this lovely design and it's part of the site plan, why shouldn't we see
what we tried to do was take a look at what the design would likely be. This is the city has got a design for the path system, the rails with trails and the other path system already being designed from 5th Street South. and then
Okay.
from, I guess, 9th Street north. This little section, which includes this applicant's property, is not currently under design. But extrapolating from the design we know is close to being done, we wanted to get an idea of just what the road frontage would be like. When the applicant first came in, they were willing to put frontage in right now. They could replace the sidewalk, and they could make a stab at where they think the sidewalks might be. So the frontage deferral is really for the city's benefit. Otherwise, the applicant could just could replace a sidewalk, do whatever they wanted to do there. If it didn't match up, the city at its own expense later would just come in, take the sidewalk out, remove any trees that were in the way, and then put it back down. So
Right.
the deferral, I mean, in a way, we sort of don't want it not to be improved. We don't want to wait too long. And that was also the
I
applicant's consideration.
understand that. It's just that a lot of our discussion at workshop, centered around, well, if the building couldn't be up on the street, then we wanted to have something very nice to look at. Now, I get that we're not going to require them to build it immediately, but I think it would also be helpful that we see the potential designs and understand, put something in place that says when it comes time to do this, it needs to look like this.
I don't want to get into too much discussion just because we do want to keep this separate from the conversations we need the
Yeah.
applicant for, but I want to make sure that we're all talking the same language when we talk about frontage improvements. It's basically curb, gutter, sidewalk, street trees. I know there was discussion at the workshop about some sort of amenitized space. That is really not a requirement of the development process for this project. It's not something we can exact from them through the standards that we have. There is no regulatory standard that they're asking for relief from that would warrant any sort of compensating design feature in that manner or anything of that nature. They're developing in accordance with that GC zone, and the normal requirements that they would be required to construct are that curb, gutter, sidewalk, street trees, that area. And that's when we talk about frontage deferral, that's what the expectation when we finish our design and know where exactly that curb line is and where everything is situated in space. That would be what they would be expected to construct. So just want to make sure that it's just that suite of frontage improvements.
And at the workshop, the applicant expressed willingness to create something more amenitized, to use your word, at the front of the building if we couldn't find a solution that brought the building closer to the road. So if they expressed a willingness to do that and they've come up with some designs, I just think it's going to be part of the conversation tonight and we should see that.
Sure. And we did try to address that a little bit. We have in the staff report there is language that talks about they did make a proffer. We don't have a proffer system in the city of Frederick where we exchange approvals for enticements, and so we need to be very careful of that they have a zone, they have standards that apply. We need to review it for that, and not give the appearance of any sort of enticement to approve a plan. So we need to be a little bit mindful of that moving forward to Monday, and why we did not share much detail on further potential design efforts. There are statements in the city code that allow someone to grant and gift the city land, and they could do that in the future, but it would have to be separate from this regulatory process because there are codes and laws that tell them what they have to do and give them the predictability to do that. So we need to be mindful of that.
Okay. Anything else?
Nope.
No, thanks.
All right. What's the next item on the agenda?
We have the forest plan for this, if we want to touch on that.
Oh, okay.
There have been no changes since the workshop for this particular for the forest plan. It had been reviewed and had no comments from any reviewing agencies earlier on in the process.
Right. Any commissioner comments?
Nope, no, thank
All
you.
right. All right. The next item.
Last but not least, we have the Winpenny annexation application, which was continued from that last month to this month. So where we are in that, which you'll see in your packet, we have in the order, we have the draft annexation agreement, which is spelling out the terms of the annexation as the applicants proposed. What our recommendations are at the end of your report are recommendations to how we would want to see that draft annexation changed moving forward to the mayor and board, because you're making a recommendation to them. So we've tried to draw the relationship between and reference the paragraphs in that draft annexation agreement with the conditions that we're recommending, if annexed, that would be applied to the project. They did provide a revised draft concept plan, which is the second attachment in your packet, and that is showing the connection to Winpenny Drive, which, as you know, has been kind of the big sticking point that we have been very focused on making sure that access is provided if this property is developed. The applicant's shown it back on the concept plan, as well as a potential connection to the property to the northwest. That property in the northwest is currently zoned resource conservation. It is not in the city, it's in the county. So stubbing a road to that would be a very long-term future connection. That property would have to be annexed and developed and all these good things. So the concept plan does reflect the condition that the city staff believes it would be appropriate to annex under. We have not received any additional feedback from the county about the feasibility of that connection. The applicant did provide a legal opinion, which is the last exhibit in your packet, talking about how they believe that the private agreements and covenants on the land related to this annexation allow them to internally make that connection and grant access over the lots. The question still remains, though, is that in any way binding on the county to grant access to its public right of way? It's fine if Joan and I agree to two things, but that doesn't mean that Dorothy's got to agree to it, right? So that conversation is still something that the applicant's going to have to work through if they are successful in being able to develop the property. We've reevaluated and basically come to the position that we would support the annexation, but it is wholly contingent upon that connection being made. So if the applicant is unable to make it, they are not able to develop. So if and until they can, work with the county to develop and get permitted the appropriate access, they would not be able to develop. And then that would be a condition of the annexation itself and be binding. The other conditions we're recommending relate to the width of the easement that they have committed to providing for a stream restoration project for the city. We get credits towards our state stormwater discharge permit that we have to meet. So when we do these stream restoration projects, it is good for the city, it's good for the environment. We want a wider width. They have 50 feet. We'd like 100 feet from each side of the stream to allow for equipment and maintenance and all those things. The second condition is related to the regional infrastructure improvement contribution. They have cited a figure of $5,000, which has been used in other annexations over the past probably 10 years. We recognize that things are more costly than they were 10 years ago, and that the figure needs to be evaluated moving forward to the mayor and board. We don't have what would be a more appropriate fee. We know it's more than $5,000, but we still need that regional infrastructure contribution. The number two, oops, I have two number ones, my apologies. Number three is that agreement with the, connection to the Winpenny Drive in the county. And then, oops, I'm sorry. Here we go. The last condition is related to the provision of a water tank. Originally, we thought we would want land for a water tank from this property, but the site is not suitable for that, and we don't want the land for it, but we do want a pro rata share of $623,000 estimate towards a construction of one. So those are the terms under which we would support the annexation. Try to provide a little bit more information about why it's beneficial to develop in the city versus in the county, what comparable densities might be, and in the short term and in the long term, and how that plays out, to try to give you some insights into why annexation, what benefits it does provide to the city, as well as to the applicant, and why they would be asking for it versus pursuing it in the county. And that's about it. We did not, with the regards to the legal opinion that was provided, we've, of course, Scott Waxter has a copy and we've all read it. If you have questions about it, I would definitely defer to the applicant's attorney. A lot of it is kind of private legal agreements, so it's, I don't want to say it's irrelevant to us. The condition is you have to connect, and all of that legal opinion and the declarations and all of that may be part of the conversation to get there, but we've settled on if you don't have that connection, you don't develop. So how you get there is how you get there, basically. Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions from the commissioners? Ron?
I do. I know my significant concern when it came to the previous meeting, and Gabrielle, you kind of touched on it in your description there, but I'll admit to you, I didn't get a chance to look at the latest documentation in detail, but I skimmed through it to look for the two things. I know they mentioned the tier 1, the tier 2, and the tier 3, and I guess my question is, are they going to address that? Because I haven't seen how I don't see anything that says tier 1 and tier 2 have been met, and therefore we should do this tier 3. That's number one. Number two, and the thing you address, they talk about the what's in it for the city analysis. I don't see anything in there that says what the benefits are to annex this property for the city. Did they address that? Did the whole the tier 1, tier 2, and the benefits to the city, is that being addressed at all in our considerations on Monday?
So I would recommend, I think one of the attachments we have the fiscal impact analysis. I know that's a lot to look at. I don't enjoy reading those, but we do have, the fiscal impact analysis that will provide some information. They did not provide anything besides the updated concept plan since the workshop. So the discussion you had at the workshop, they have not provided any kind of point-by-point evaluation of those discussions. I touched on a little bit in the staff report, some of the considerations, but we definitely, those are good conversations for Monday. So there's not like a point-by-point I can point to you to look at and read over the weekend. The staff report, the fiscal impact analysis does tell a bit about, what benefits and tax revenues and those sorts of things can be generated. There's some population data talking about the anticipated household, needs we have moving forward. So it's kind of the composite of all that. So those are the areas I would focus on looking at, and then, asking questions about on Monday, for discussion, because those are, that is the eternal question, right? That's what you're going to deliberate on Monday is
what's in process?
Well, and is, annexation, I tend to look at it as, we have areas that we've identified we need to grow in. We know we're going to grow there. It's a matter of time. It's a matter of, do we have and are we planning for that expanded growth? Is really the question. Is it time? And that's why those policies of the comp plan you talk about, hey, our priorities, tier 1, tier 2, then when those areas are substantially developed, tier 3, but we should also be looking at annexations for the benefits that they provide to the city. So
Okay.
yeah, that's the good questions, the nature of the conversation we want to have.
Thank you.
Dorothy, any questions?
Nothing, thank you. I have to read it. I haven't looked at it yet. So
Yeah, I haven't either. I have no questions at this point.
Excellent.
So we going to talk about Brickworks now?
I was going to say the gorilla in the room. So I sent Barb, and I apologize. She probably told me that what her schedule was, and I probably blanked. I sent her an email earlier asking. We have not published our staff report. We do not have it completed. So I don't know that there's much of a benefit to having any discussion about it. One, you guys don't have anything to look at and have any context. If we start talking stuff, it won't maybe make a lot of sense. What my proposal was to Barb was to have another. Oh, yes, Dorothy.
I'm with you to finish.
My proposal to Barb, and she, poor woman's driving and probably is like, I can't answer you all the time, was to schedule another meeting much like this next Friday afternoon, to kind of keep the flow of doing our pre-PC before the hearing the weekend before, if that would be a time that would work for everyone to do a virtual just for the Brickworks pre-planning commission meeting on Friday, was the date I checked to see if our AV communications folks were available to run the show. They were, but my intent was to get her thoughts, then reach out to everybody and see what they were thinking. And unfortunately, couldn't touch base with her today. So that is where we are.
Dorothy, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I'm available on Friday, but I really had, and I don't need a staff report or anything, but I was just more trying to hone in on some language. I mean, if it's not appropriate to talk about it now, that's fine. I can wait till next Friday, but I wanted to specifically look at the language related to building orientation as it relates to non-residential buildings. But I don't know if you guys want to do that now.
Let's do that when we talk about it.
Okay.
Ron, any thoughts on doing another pre-meeting?
I think it's great. Yeah. Yeah. Obviously, we need a lot more info.
Yeah.
Like Dorothy's asking for before we get to that point. So
I personally cannot do next Friday. What is the feasibility? I mean, we're doing a workshop on the 16th, right?
Correct. That'll be the day before
right. Is that feasible for kind of doing a pre-meeting, or does that give us time to make any changes if anything comes up?
Make any changes to?
I mean, sometimes at these meetings we say
information, I think is what you're saying.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, no, definitely would not allow for much follow up. I did not talk with April or Ben about their availability for the date at all. I don't know if there's another date next week, Thursday, or, another afternoon. What we need to balance on our end is obviously when we call a special meeting, we want to make sure we put it out there to the public so that they're aware. We give some, notice. We have the rules of procedure talk about having to, put the word out there. So we want to do that with ample time before we have the meeting. I think Monday would be close. Monday the 16th.
Is there a prescribed time that has to be met?
There's not a prescribed time, no. I think it's pretty general.
I personally could do Thursday the 12th, but I can't do Friday. So if everybody else can do Friday, I'll just, look at the meeting online before the weekend or before the meeting on the 17th.
Well, since we only have three of you and we're missing our other half, maybe I'll send an email to get availabilities. But it was not, unfortunately, our intent to talk about it this afternoon, since we hadn't had much. But I think it warrants a good debriefing, so we can make sure everybody's following what's in the packet and what we've published, and that we have all of our resources available to answer your questions at the hearing.
Okay.
So I'll send an email. I'll find Barb wherever she is, and we'll coordinate on a date.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Do we have anything else? Oh, yes, Dorothy?
Nope, I was saying goodbye. I'm sorry.
Oh, that was a bye-bye. That was not a hand.
apologize.
A wave, not a hand raise. They don't look that different. All right. All right. Well, then if there's nothing else, then we'll adjourn the meeting and we'll see you guys on Monday.
Thank you all
Good
so very
weekend,
much.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.